Hello, hello, and welcome to our very first episode of our new podcast, Reality Rights. That's right, Reality Rights, where we are going to give you behind the scenes information and insight into all of the things that go into writing mysteries. That's my end of what we do. And also, Tech Guy, do you want to tell them what you do?
Everything after that, everything from promoting books, marketing books, building readership audiences, managing all the technology, the logistics that go into simple things like book talks at bookstores, things like that.
And for anyone who doesn't know us, this is obviously our first episode of the podcast. So many of you may be familiar with my books, perhaps, and they may have seen your face every once in a while on some of the live streams that we've done over the years. But I am author Ellie Alexander, and I have made a career out of killing people, fictionally speaking. And I don't know, maybe in this podcast, we'll peel the curtain back and I'll talk about some of the people that I would love to kill fictionally in future books. We'll see. We'll see where it goes.
And I am the tech guy, the other half, the Ellie Alexander Writing Empire. And I manage all things technical and anything geek related, which is my background, bad in advertising. So here we go.
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to come up with a fun and clever name for our listeners, aka viewers, because you will be able to listen to this podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And we will also be airing it on places like YouTube if you want to see us. And we'll sometimes be showing multimedia, right? We'll be working in some imagery, but you don't have to watch it if you're not into it.
Right. Yeah, we'll describe everything. I mean, we're going to be talking about our successes, our failures, all the frustrations that's gone into things, the things that we're proud of, the things that we wish we had done better. That it's going to run the gamut. But yeah, sometimes we will show stuff. So when we can, we'll show it on video, and but we'll try to make it as fun and entertaining as possible with just the audio.
That's right. So, for starters, we have to think of something that listeners would love to be called. And I keep coming up with murderous ideas, but I'm wondering if is that too dark? Do we need to do something more lighthearted?
I think probably yes.
Why? Come on.
Try to keep this a little light. Yeah. So, but although I would like to hear some of your murderous ideas, maybe it'll spark some inspiration for other names.
Yeah, I mean, like, what keeps coming to mind is like Dark Horse, and I have no idea why. Like the Dark Horses, it has nothing to do with my writing whatsoever, not even remotely.
All right.
The Murderous Mixers. You know me, I always want to lean into alliteration.
Alliteration
Yeah,
and puns. Yeah.
alliteration and puns. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, it has to be something different besides the listeners.
Listeners is lame. Listeners is like, no.
Okay. Got it.
Reality writers is also like, no, come on.
Yeah.
Hey, all you reality writers out there.
Well, not everybody's going to be a writer. A lot of people
Exactly.
Writers, so.
Yeah, reality readers.
Yeah.
You realityers? That doesn't fly off the lips. No.
Definitely not. Yeah.
See, this is really how brainstorming sessions for books go too. It's a lot of this where it's like you start with an idea. I think I might have had Dark Horse in my mind because it's my favorite wine.
See, I would have said it's my favorite comic book company, but
and we binged Slow Horses, so maybe I also have like a bit of that in my head. But this is usually how the writing process works, where if you're helping me brainstorm, we will sit outside with a fun drink, and it's a lot of yes, no, definitely no, and then at some point you land on something.
Right. And a lot of the times you hear in brainstorming sessions that, hey, just throw it out there, throw it out there. There are no bad ideas. Well, I'm here to tell you there are some really crappy ideas. So like, yeah, when people say that, they're lying to you, because there are bad ideas for sure.
There are such bad ideas, but I maintain the fact that there are no bad ideas when you're brainstorming, because bad ideas often lead to good ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Right?
That's true. Yeah, they can. They can also lead to worse ideas. So,
Sometimes they can also lead.
coming from the advertising world, I'll tell you, like, you can go into a client presentation and think that you have nailed it, that you have gotten that creative brief and you just nailed it, and come up with the most creative thing that a client is going to love. And they will tell you that it is absolute garbage. And you've got to go back to the drawing board. So yeah, sometimes what you think is a good idea is really, it's all subjective, right? Like books.
Yeah, and that segues in nicely to the topic of our first podcast, which is going to be all about the plot ideas that never made the final cut. I have had to kill my darlings so often because I had ideas that just were pretty bad and terrible. We didn't even set this up, but to loop back, maybe what we need to do is we need to have our listeners, for lack of a better word.
We'll go with listeners for right now, and we'll, as the episode progresses, maybe something will come up.
Something will come up, but maybe they can also suggest ideas to us.
That's true.
They're more clever than we are, probably.
Probably.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we thought it would be really fun to kick this one off with all of the plot ideas that, just failed to go anywhere. I'm pausing just because are you looking up something?
No.
Oh, you look like you were on your phone.
No. I was trying to make sure the microphone was at home.
Okay. I'm going to start over from there. We thought it would be fun on this first podcast to talk about all of the plot ideas that I started with, that we often brainstorm together, and then that failed to turn into anything that should ever end up in a final version of a book, right?
Right. And there have been a lot. I mean, going back to that advertising example, there have been many where, ideas, book ideas, plot ideas, I should say, not necessarily book ideas, plot ideas for books that you I think came up with and thought, wow, this is going to be the best, absolute best. And then whether it was you yourself, which happens a lot, or one of your initial friends or early readers are like, no, that doesn't work, or you can't do that. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And we got to start at the very beginning with the BAKESHOP mysteries, I feel like, because there are quite a few key ideas in that series in particular when I was starting out that I thought were really going to take off, and then they went nowhere. But to back up even further, I have to tell the story of how that series came to be. Because in terms of writing, I was already writing a Pacific Northwest mystery series, and my agent called me. I will never forget this. You were at work and I was out at the lake. It was the middle of summer, and my best friend Cassie was visiting from, my best friend from college was visiting from Alaska with her twins. And our son, Sky Guy, was about their same age, and they were playing. And I got a call from my agent, which, at that stage in my career, anytime I got a call from my agent, I was just excited because it meant something bookish. And I got the voicemail from him saying, hey, I have this opportunity for you. I have a new series that I would love for you to write. And then I had no service to call him back. And of course, I wanted to do it in the moment, which now I would be like, why would I have that conversation out at a lake with the kids? But, in the moment, I was excited.
Yeah, it was. Well, you should have been. But yeah, you were a little panicked too. And then you were worried that you were going to take too long to get back to them. And yeah.
Yes. So this particular series came to me as a brief from my editor at Macmillan, who she didn't have a lot for me to go on, but she wanted a mother-daughter baking team and sort of in the tone of the Gilmore Girls. And so my agent was like, you have 2 weeks to put together an entire series proposal with the arc of the series, titles and little mini synopses for the first 3 books in the series, and then the first 50 pages of the book. 2 weeks. And at this point in time, we also had, like an elementary school kid, and you were working full time and I was working part time. And this series ended up becoming my long running series, The BAKESHOP Mysteries, which is set in Ashland, Oregon. And one of the first things that I said is, okay, if I'm going to set this in Ashland, we have to go to Ashland like right away, which is like a 5-hour drive from where we were living at the time.
Right. Yeah. So we packed up and we just left for Ashland.
Literally, pretty much.
Yeah.
You were such a trooper. I'm like, we got to go to Ashland. You're like, okay, we're going to Ashland.
I had never been to Ashland. So that was a first. So.
Was that your first trip to Ashland?
Yeah, it was my very first trip. I'd never been.
Oh my gosh.
We didn't go in high school. Yeah. I know you did for the Shakespeare Festival, but we didn't do that.
I had totally spaced that was your first trip.
Yeah. First ever.
Amazing. Yeah. So
it was awesome.
We went all around town. I took a zillion pictures and was brainstorming ideas. And I found a bunch of like the original materials that I have, and I saved them all. So these are like original OSF brochures for everything that was playing at the time. I had maps of town, just everything I could possibly imagine. And after we did that trip, I came back home and I got to work. Also, this sort of dates us, but look at like the brochures from back then. It's this tiny little thing it's like scenic maps of Southern Oregon. And it looks like it's straight out of the 80s. This was what, 2010 maybe?
Yeah. No, it was, right around then.
2012, something like that. Yeah. Anyway, so I came back home and I started brainstorming, and I still have my original notebook of all of this is a big yellow legal pad of all of the ideas that I had initially for Juliet Montague Capshaw, who becomes, Jules, who we all know and love. Her original name was going to be Jules Hudson.
Not as Shakespearean.
No. But then the first victim is Nancy Hudson. So clearly I was feeling Hudson for some reason.
Yeah.
The bake shop, which is Torte, was going to be Gooseberry Fool.
I remember that one. Going back to there are no bad ideas.
I think you might have vetoed that one.
I did not like that one. I think I was pretty honest about that at the time.
I'm sure you were. Shakespeare's Kitchen.
It seems a little on the nose.
Marzipan! Exclamation point.
Here. That one wasn't bad. Marzipan, but the exclamation point, yeah. Marzipan!
Marzipan! You love it.
Yeah.
As You Like It.
Yeah, that was good. I like that one.
Cakes and Ale.
Yeah.
Yeah. Below the Salt.
I never got that one.
I have a note here because I think I was trying to convince you of it at one point in time. Salt was prized and was always at the head of the table in Shakespeare's kitchen.
Yeah, but I'd love to hear from listeners. Whatever to be named.
To be named, yeah.
How many people would know that though?
Below, I think everybody knows below the salt.
You think everybody? Okay, I'm out of the loop. I'm not. I mean, I'm the first to admit Shakespeare is not my my forte, but I've learned more about Shakespeare from being with you and you writing the series than I ever knew from school or anything. But Below the Salt, I didn't. Like it. I didn't like it at all.
Come on, that's amazing. Below the Salt.
Sorry.
No,
it was just I didn't think that because with my background in advertising and marketing, I immediately started thinking of like logos and merch and things like that we could advertise it. And Below the Salt, I was like that. I don't even know what, there'd be just this cloud. It's the salt's coming at you. Look out. It's just like, And the first thing that comes to mind is like a sandstorm or something. So, but of
That could have been
salt.
slow.
So
Yeah, with
but
murder.
yeah. But when you came up with Tort, that was it. It was like because that goes back to the whole brainstorming thing, right? Is that you knew when you thought of that, you knew that was it, right?
Instantly. Yeah. When you learn something like that, then it all comes together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that. That was a lot and a lot. We're still talking within 2 weeks. And obviously what I wrote initially in that pitch morphed over time once I actually like signed the contract and then began writing the books. But I had to be able to build that world pretty quickly and to also think of a 3-book arc. Usually, especially then, I was new in my career. I was never anticipating, as of this first podcast, I'm writing book 20 in this series. I never was anticipating. I would have been thrilled just to have it go 3 books at that point in time. So I had ideas basically through that point, and then a few sketches of what could happen. But that leads me to, and this is a spoiler. Do we need some kind of like sound for a spoiler? Do you think?
I mean, I have a lot of sounds, but I don't know, like, yeah, we could come up with something.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Very true.
We'll have to make it.
It's still going. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so you will now know, listeners, that there are spoilers coming. Okay, so this is the first big spoiler, which is, and I think this was a product of needing to write something quickly to get it out. Because what happened is after I did that in 2 weeks and sent that package to my agent, he ended up selling it in like another week. And then it was off to the races and I was writing. And then I had a lot more time to really think about like the world and the plot and everything. But Carlos, who is Jules' estranged husband in book 1 in Meet Your Baker, I had written the first 3 books so that she was leaving him on the ship. And by book 3, she was never going to see him again. Yeah. It was done. It was over.
Very sad.
So sad. I had an entirely different vision for who she was going to end up with. And I'm sure her longtime readers will have some guesses as to.
Obvious. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
What's obvious?
The other option?
Yeah.
If it wasn't Carlos, who the other option was, yeah.
Come on. I get more reader mail about that arc than probably anything else.
Right. I mean, because there was like for a long time, right? Early on, there were 2 teams, like we can't,
no, we can, because we're spoiling.
Okay.
We did the dark.
There was team Carlos and there was team Thomas.
Yeah.
Right. And it got ugly. I'm not going to say like, it was a little,
it's a lot
ugly. Like it was a little like New York Yankees, Boston Red Sox, Steelers, Browns. Like it was your Steelers, Ravens. Like, I don't know, I'm a Steelers fan, so we've got a lot of rivals. It got ugly. Like the 2 teams, they battled it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was also really cool at the time. Like I was kind of stunned by it. I wasn't anticipating that. And I hadn't planned on writing it for like setting up this idea of Team Thomas versus Team Carlos. And so that just sort of happened organically. And then the first few big book events that we threw, and we'll have to do a whole podcast just on those because those were epic back in the day. People would show up with like Team Thomas t-shirts on and everything.
I know.
It's like, what?
Or like not so subtly threaten you of like, Jules better not end up with Carlos, or Jules better not end up with Tom. And it was just like, whoa, easy there. This is just like cozy mystery series. Like I don't know. People were passionate about it. Let's just say that they were passionate.
Which, how can you not love that passion? Like I have never cared about, being famous or anything like that. But if somebody like, I have created something in my mind that someone else feels that passionately about, like that to me is the ultimate gift forever. Like However, there was, remember the reader who brought like pages and pages of notes of
Yes.
what they
Yeah.
thought
Yeah.
might happen if I send Jules in the wrong direction. It was a little intense, let's just say.
Yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot. That was when
Yeah.
we decided that maybe it wasn't such a good idea for people to know your home address.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's like more than a little nugget of truth to that, but also like completely awesome that people are like, I'm all in. I am all in.
Totally.
And then also feeling a little bit of fear myself of like, oh no, I am going to, because it was really divided. I think it still is. I am potentially going to really make an entire group of readers very angry with whatever path Jules ends up taking.
Right. Well, and we talked about that because you and I talked about that a lot because, as you mentioned, this was early on in your writing career, and it's, I think you might have had like 5 books or maybe 6 books out in the world at that point. So, nothing compared to what you do now, but we were, and probably a little naively, like worried that you were suddenly going to lose like thousands of readers because of this one choice. And it, like, we're probably blowing it. Actually, in hindsight, we blew it a lot out of proportion. But
definitely.
But it is funny, and we'll get into more of that, like I guess in later episodes, just about like kind of the growth of just our knowledge of the industry and that sort of thing. But that was, I remember at the time, just we debated that for a lot, like that was a lot of like dinners and everything, and just talking about what might happen if you chose the wrong way,
the wrong path.
To some readers, others would be like, woohoo, but but then there'd be others that'd be like, get the pitchforks, like,
yes. So. Yeah. And ultimately, I think that decision, maybe more than anything else that I've made in my writing career, really like set the path for how I approach my writing. And even when I say this now, it still feels so cheesy, but it's true. Like, I really thought that arc was gonna end at the end of book 3, and that there wouldn't be a ton of animosity. I wasn't thinking anything like that. Like, they had this intense love affair on the cruise line, and he had the secret that really sent her reeling and ultimately sent her back to Ashland, which was my whole goal with that, right? It was just a plot device to get her back to Ashland. Yeah, exactly, because her story was really about finding home early on. And so I had that in my head the whole time. And then every time I would sit down to write something, it would be like, Carlos would just be like, hola, I'm back. Here I am again.
How many pictures of like hot, shirtless Spanish men you have hanging on the wall?
I was trying to find all of my...
I'd love, exactly. I'd love to hear from readers. Like if the tables were turned and I was writing a book and I just had like scantily clad women hanging all over my office, that would not fly. I have a feeling that would not fly. Yeah.
Totally unacceptable. Yeah. This is art. This is trying to get into a character's headspace.
Right. This is the author. Yeah. That's what I heard somebody say. This is the author's process. I have to do it. When I'm writing about Carlos, I have to be able to see this imagery.
Exactly.
Like, okay. Yeah.
But in general, what I do think that for sure. I agree. Go ahead. You should write like something, thriller-esque and, put up a bikini babe in your office and I'll come in and rip her down. But no, what I think that process taught me was to just trust the creative flow. Because then it really, and I think if you go back and read the early books, I never go back and read them, but I'm sure you could probably believe that Juliet was planning to go down this path with Thomas, right? And then as I got to know the characters better, as they did like take up more space in my head, I would plot out, I know with book 4, 5, and 6, I would plot out these stories that he wasn't in. And then it would be like, oh, nope, I'm writing away. And here he is. He's showing up again. But I think it's made the story so much richer. There are so many things that I've been able to develop with her. It's like the characters do at some point in time take over, and that's amazing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was really cool to see the kind of whole process and how it played out, because yeah, I mean, you did, and I don't think like even longtime readers don't understand like how much angst went into that decision, even when it came to you and you're like, of course this is the story, this is what, but you like, there was just a lot of like second guessing, I guess, that went on in terms of trying to make sure you were finding the right path for Jules.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's just a good reminder of like, if you just sink into the process of writing, and this is true for anyone who might be listening who's writing themselves, the story always like finds its way through. Not that you also don't want to have some sort of plans and visions, which I always do, but letting that be malleable a little bit and like giving yourself room to change things as you go.
Right. Well, and that's the whole point of this episode, right? Is that you had those visions and they changed. Yeah. You want to, can we talk about the next one? That involves,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we need another spoiler sound here though for that. This is going to be another spoiler. Okay.
How about
ooh. Okay, I like it. Okay, so this is just a spoiler for book 1. Book 1 is Meet Your Baker, and I had written the entire book, felt great about it, had a fantastic motive for the killer, understood the killer's motivation, how it had all come together. I was working on the 3rd draft of the book, and I suddenly realized I love the killer, and I want the killer to be an ongoing person in this series. Who is the killer? Do you want to reveal or should I? Yeah, you could reveal. Yeah.
Sterling. Yeah. Who knew? The guy went in the span of a couple of weeks. He went from being a murderous scoundrel to like one of the most loved characters in the entire series.
I still get
quite the turnaround. Yeah.
Quite the turnaround. Yeah. And I still to this day get so many lovely messages, DMs, emails about Sterling and who's my inspiration for him and how people want a real Sterling in their life. Like that would have been so bananas. Why did I think that?
Yeah, that one, that would have been interesting too. That would have been almost as interesting as, I mean, he hadn't quite been around or been as involved as Carlos or Thomas, but it still would have been interesting to see the reader reaction had he ended up being the villain in that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then it was so much work to have to go back and rewrite the entire book to change it to he was still a suspect in book 1. But I had to change so much because the way that I had penned him the first time around obviously did not line up with the character that he became.
Yeah, that actually is, that's a good point, because that took a lot of rereads and rewrites and everything to catch all that stuff. Because once you go down one path, going back and catching all of the pieces that you need to remove or change in order to go with the story that you ended up, the path that you ended up choosing, that is tough. It's tough to catch all that stuff.
Yeah, I know. All right, should we segue and talk about SLOAN a little bit?
Yeah. Leavenworth. Hey,
Leavenworth.
Wow. Yeah.
I know. We're going to be there in a few weeks.
Yeah.
A month or so. Yeah.
A month. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So originally I had this idea for this beer series and I had pitched it to my agent and he was like, I can't sell beer. Can't do it. Nope.
Ridiculous.
Ridiculous. And
Ridiculous.
you were home brewing at the time. So that was already
Mhm.
like in my head. But that series originally was going to be set in Portland.
Right. Right.
And I think I had also talked about Bend. I have all these notes about
Yeah.
Bend too.
Well, at the time, and they still are to a certain extent, but at the time, like Portland and Bend were like the center of the craft beer world, at least for the Pacific Northwest. And so it made sense to set it in one of those places. But then you started thinking about like Portland and Bend are pretty big cities in comparison to the kind of tight-knit village atmosphere they wanted to create.
And then we went to Leavenworth for Oktoberfest, and for a book event not related, I was doing a signing for my other series, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, no, it has to be here."
Yeah, we were immediately like, this is it. And so, yeah, we went from a city with what Portland at the time was, I don't know, close to 1 million people with the surrounding area. And Bend was probably 100,000, 120,000. And Leavenworth is 2,000.
2000, yeah.
2,000 residents. So, I mean, they have huge festivals. They get over 1 million tourists a year. But
right.
the full-time residents in Leavenworth, it's like 2,000 or 2,500 something. It's very, very small.
Tiny. Well, the one plot idea that definitely, or this is a name idea again to start with, that definitely did not make the cut is the brewery that SLOAN KRAUSE ends up working for is Nitro in the book, and we brainstormed this together a lot. But the note that I have that I was desperate to keep, originally the brewery I wanted to call Bruins Brewing.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
It's that alliteration again. It's like,
I know.
I'm like, holy crap, not everything needs to rhyme. Can we just get like, plus I made the case that Torte being a one word, one syllable name, like it was just perfect it's
clean.
It's clean.
Yeah.
It instantly gives you that visual of like a really high end pastry, BAKESHOP type setting. Sorry, couldn't think of the word. And I thought that was great. And so I felt like we needed the same thing for this, rather than Bruins Brewing.
And the reason I wanted that is because our good friend Erica, who was doing a lot of marketing and everything for me in the early days, her youngest son was brewing, and he was just this wild child. And I was like so inspired by, he was not brewing, obviously, but it was like Bruins Brewing. Yeah, that didn't make that.
He could have been.
I don't think it would have worked.
Totally. Yeah. No. I mean it. Yeah, that was. Do you have other? Because you had more than just that as name ideas. Do you have other ideas still written down?
I have so many ideas still written down for that, and they're all terrible. They're all just really like, taps on flow. What?
They just kept getting longer too. That's the thing I don't understand. I'm terrible. You need to go the other way. Like, yeah.
And what does that even mean? Taps on flow?
I don't know. Yeah. Taps flow, but hopefully there's a glass under them. So yeah.
This goes back to the no bad ideas though, because that ultimately led to Nitro. And I think that came about because we were out having a beer somewhere talking about the series, and you got something on Nitro.
Yeah,
and I was like, that's it.
Out.
Yeah.
It was like it was winter at the time. I think it was like
I think so. Yeah,
really dark stout that was on Nitro. It was very smooth.
It's perfect.
Yeah, and that was because we said I remember just like drinking that and going, oh, this is smooth, and we started talking about what makes it smooth, and I was talking about the difference between nitrogen and carbon dioxide, and how the nitrogen bubbles are so much smaller. Like they're so much smaller than the carbon dioxide bubbles. So when you use nitrogen when you add nitrogen to a beer to carbonate it instead of carbon dioxide, the carbonation is drinks a lot smoother than it does with the carbon dioxide. But we were talking about it, and that's when you were like, nitro. What if we did nitro? And we were both like, yeah, that sounds great. It's perfect.
Perfect.
And there it was.
Yeah. Okay, these next two are also related to SLOAN, and they're like spoiler adjacent. I don't think it's going to matter, so I don't think we need a sound effect for them.
Right.
Because they're things that just like they would make sense, but they didn't come to fruition, and they're not spoiling anything per se. So the first thing that I had a whole stack of notes and plot points on was that SLOAN goes to work for Garrett at Nitro. He's starting this small startup nano brewery, right? And she had been working for years at Durkeller, which is her soon-to-be ex-husband, Mac, his family brewery. And Mac wants her back. We learn in book 1 that he's shagging the beer wench, and that's what sends SLOAN packing, and she's done with him. So I had this whole plot point that throughout the series, Mac was constantly going to be sabotaging Nitro. I don't even know if we ever talked about that.
No, this is like, that does not ring a bell.
Yeah. He was going to be like sneaking in at night and like disconnecting hoses and like stealing their
doing a bunch of illegal stuff. Yeah. Okay.
And I had that charted out for like the first 5 books in each book. And he was never going to be a suspect for murder, but it was always going to be, there was going to be something shady that he was doing. And then as I started writing the first book and got to know him and the characters more, same thing, I realized like, no, he's going to have a growth arc too. And I wanted him and SLOAN to co-parent together. There were all these great things about him as a character too. Like they weren't right for each other anymore, but he's not just an asshole. He's not a terrible guy. He's made some really bad choices. And there's a reason for that. But SLOAN is also like, she's sort of gone along with this marriage for the wrong reasons too. So there's a lot of growth for both of them. And then it also just maybe seemed, I don't know, a little bit too campy too. So I think I just ditched that.
Right. Plus,
could have been fun.
Sad to see somebody ruin a lot of good beer.
Oh, see, I did not think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have been very sad.
I did have one note, and you know how this came up. We had a beer fridge in our basement at our old house.
Yeah, I know what you're gonna say. This is terrible.
And you would brew little small batches, and so we would have it on tap in the basement. And our niece came for a visit. Do you want to jump in and share the rest of the story?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't there. I was actually with your dad and brother, I think, at a football game down in Eugene. But I remember hearing the results of it secondhand. It was awful. So she was, how old do you think she was at the time?
3, 4, something like that.
Something like that. And so you and your sister and Heather, her sister-in-law, were watching the game on TV, and Mackenzie, our niece, had like wandered out of the family room into the second kitchen we had in the basement there, and pulled one of the taps. And I hadn't replaced it yet. I had 2 taps, one that was auto close. So when you pulled it, you just let it go and it would close, to avoid situations like this. Unfortunately, she pulled the other one, which is not auto close, and left it going, and then went in back to show the 3 of you. Hey, look what I did, guys.
Come see what I did, guys. Come see
what I did, guys. Come see what I did. And there were somewhere between 3 and 5 gallons of beer on all over the floor. I had just been spewing out of that tap. So that tap was flowing. It was flowing.
See?
Taps are
Yeah.
flowing.
Taps of flowing. Taps of flowing. So I had written this scene where Mac had snuck into Nitro late at night and hit all the taps and like flooded the whole bar. Right?
Been
Yeah.
tragic.
I know. He could have died for that.
Mess to clean up too.
I know.
Oh, my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So
Yikes.
that did not make the cut.
Okay, good. I'm glad. That would have been. I don't have much editorial say in what you write, but that I would have played my chip there. So,
That's right. No, you cannot murder the beer.
no, you can't. You can
People?
murder people,
Fine.
but not beer. Yeah.
Exactly. And then there's one other plot point for the Sloan KRAUSE series that I had in mind. And this kind of goes back to the whole Carlos thing. So Sloan is very close to her brother-in-law, Hans. And we know that from day one. And I had
Hans
this
is another
vision.
guy that had pictures hanging on the wall. Just
Did
FYI.
have pictures. Yeah, exactly. It's true. I had a vision that at some point farther into the series that Sloan and Hans might end up together.
Mhm.
And I think you can kind of pick up, again, kind of like Carlos, I think you can kind of pick up a little tiny hint of that maybe in the first couple of books. And then again, I realized, no, that's not right. Like she's a former foster child. Like her whole arc is about family and creating her own family and recognizing that she's done that herself. And he's such a brother to her that that just felt wrong. And then that would have added, I mean, I guess from a writing perspective, this is good, but that would have added so much tension in the family dynamic with Mac and Hans. And so
that would have been pretty much crosses a line. I don't know. Like if you can't really get together with your brother's ex-wife. Like,
can you?
I don't. Well, I mean, maybe in real life, but like in the cozy mystery world, I think that's gonna cross like several lines of bad stuff that you can't do, right?
Well, there's still time. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah.
That would have been a rough one.
I got axed too. Yeah. I know, but it's so fun to think back through all of those. Like, it's like, thinking about the multiverse. Like, there are all these possible book ideas that could have happened. And any of these that we've discussed today would have radically altered the path for both of these series, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, and you've actually had readers suggest that too. Like, you should go back and write it like the alternate version where you chose all this stuff. And I was like, I mean, it's kind of cool, but the problem with that is that people would mix up the books, and then it would be like new readers to the series might get like books 1 and 2 would be version A, and then book 3 they pick version B on accident, and they have no idea what's going on.
Right, they're completely lost.
It's like, wait, who is this person? And like,
where am I?
I thought that guy wasn't the killer, but now he is. I don't know what's happening. So
yeah. No, I feel like it's all worked out the way it was meant to be.
Yeah, definitely.
Usually in spite of my own initial bad ideas.
Taps of flowing and gooseberry what?
Gooseberry tart. Gooseberry fool. Gooseberry
fool. Yeah. So all you listeners out there, we have the Torte BAKESHOP and the Nitro Craft Brewery, or we could have had the Gooseberry Fool BakeShop and the Taps of Flowin Craft Brewery.
Something to think about.
I think you chose the right path. For both of those series. That's my opinion.
Okay. All right. Bye. Well, that seems like a good place to end our first episode on that note. Yeah.
Yeah. This is fun. I can't wait for more topics. We've got a lot coming up, a lot of peeks behind the curtain, and we're going to be taking suggestions from people as well. So I can't wait to get back at it with another episode.
I know, it's going to be great. And if you have a better thought for listeners, dark horses, etc.,
We'll come
Hit
up with
us
some
up.
suggestions for the
Yeah.
next one. And then maybe we
Okay.
can have people vote on it. But
I like it.
yeah, for sure.
Okay. Till next
All right.
time.
Till next time. Goodbye.
Bye.